Alright everybody, today I got a 2017 Mini Cooper in the shop. We're going to put a clutch in it. It's got right at about 48,000 miles. So the first flywheel I ordered came out of the box and sounded really noisy. And I didn't think that sounded good. I called Luke and they told me it should be completely quiet. So I went ahead and ordered a second flywheel. Showed up this morning. About 3 days later. It's also noisy. So I called Luke again and got a hold of somebody else. They dug a little deeper into their notes, and the guy told me he had a note that these are noisy when you have them off the vehicle and move them around, but it should be quiet on the vehicle. So fingers crossed, I'm going to install this and hope it's quiet. Here's a quick note on installing this flywheel. The bolt holes go all the way through, so if you don't have a sealant on the bolts, you can end up with a pretty good oil leak there. And I thought these bolts were going to be a torque to yield. They're not. They're torqued down to 120 newton meters, but they do come with a Loctite on the bolts, which is also a sealant. So we'll get this installed and torqued down. We're going to put this reluctor ring on. Again, the crankshaft sensor reads off of this ring, indexed with that dowel pin. I'm going to go ahead and torque this flywheel down. I put a bolt in the bell housing hole so I can help hold the flywheel. I'm going to go ahead and use this angled pry bar. So my clutch kit didn't come with a line-up tool for the disc, so that's why I saved some of these old ones. And I'll just dig through here until I find one that gets me close enough to help line this up. Okay, so I'm going to install the disc. You want to pay attention to the label on the disc. It says gearbox side. Make sure you get that in correctly. So gearbox goes towards the transmission. And I did find a line-up tool that gets me close enough to line this up. These bolts are torqued down to 15 newton meters and then 90 degrees. Okay, 90 degrees. And one more time after I get that torqued down, I always make sure my line-up tool will go in, come out easily, and double check that the fingers on the pressure plate are all even. So I'm going to pop this old throwout bearing and bearing fork off of here. Bunch more clutch material behind the fork. And I'll go ahead and put a light coating of wheel bearing grease where the throwout bearing rides, where the disc slides on the shaft here on the splines, and up on that pivot ball. This kit did not come with any clutch grease. Regular wheel bearing grease has always worked just fine for me. And you just want a light layer, don't over grease it. Okay, go ahead and put this new release bearing and bearing fork on. Once I snap that into place, I'll always kind of actuate that a little bit, make sure it feels like it's working properly. And we should be good to go to get this transmission installed to the engine. So just keep wiggling this transmission until we get seated up against the bell housing here. From there, go ahead and tighten up some bolts. Got all the lower bell housing bolts tightened up here, all the big ones anyway, and I'm going to go ahead and jack the transmission up. Go ahead and jack the tranny up So I can hook that mount up and I'll climb up on a ladder, tighten those bolts up. So I'm going to install and tighten up these 3 bolts at the transmission mount. And when I tighten these up, I like the bolt to line up with the mark where it used to be. And it just helps prevent vibrations from having the mount at a funny angle. So now that I've got the mount installed, I can go ahead and get the jack and safety stand out of the way. Transmission can hang on those mounts again. And get this out of the way. Everything looks good up top. I'm going to go ahead and start installing some of these lower components back to the transmission. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this CV axle and bearing bracket installed. Okay, get these bolts tightened up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and install this ground wire. And then I'm going to install the slave cylinder here. Push that in kind of slow. It'll be pushing fluid back up into the master. Okay, I'll step on the clutch pedal, make sure that feels smooth and returns the way it should. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get the driver's side axle installed. Go ahead and tighten up the axle bolt on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and get this duct installed back up by the turbo. I'm going to get my favorite son to help with this subframe here. I'm going to tighten the middle bolts up on the upper part of the subframe here. Same bolt on the other side. Move to the rear of the subframe. Tighten these very rear bolts up. Same thing on the other side. Tighten up these bolts by the control arm bushing here on both sides. Go ahead and grab the other side. Tighten up these bolts that hold the front section and the rear of the subframe together. Same thing on the other side. I'll get these 6 bolts that are on the front section of the subframe, 3 on each side. On the passenger side of the subframe is this bracket that helps hold the washer jug in. 3 10mm bolts here. Plug this evap line back in. Snap it down in this bracket up here. And get this rear section connected again. Make sure that doesn't come back out. Go ahead and spray a little WD-40 on these exhaust mounts. Help them plug in, push on a little easier. WD-40 can be like magic at times. I'll get this level sensor plugged in on the passenger side of the vehicle. Didn't have one on the other side. And WD-40 helps get past the rubber on there and push these little tabs that hold the harness onto the subframe back in. Get this torque mount installed from the subframe to the oil pan. I'm going to go ahead and pry these control arms down so I can get the ball joints installed back into the spindle. Do the same on the other side. Sometimes when you're putting the bolt through for the ball joint, it doesn't want to go all the way through, and you can just pry it down just a touch. Let that bolt slide through. Tighten these up on both sides. Next on the list here, I'm going to tighten up these sway bar links, get them installed into the sway bar. And on these, it's good to hold that center stud with this T30. And the driver side sway bar link, same thing. I'll hold the stud with this T30. I'm going to go ahead and get the tie rod installed here on the driver's side. Those studs will spin a lot of times when you go to tighten them. On this one, I'm going to just put a little pressure on the tie rod end here with this screw jack. That'll help keep that tie rod stud from spinning. Passenger side tie rod end. Couple of plugs up here on the steering gear I'm going to get plugged in. Got these locking mechanisms on the bottom of the intercooler. So these little plastic pieces go up into rubber there, so I just spray a little WD-40, help that get in there. Same thing on the other side. And the actual lock mechanism then. And that just pushes into that bigger part. That locks the intercooler into its mounts. Go ahead and fill the transmission until it comes out the hole. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and plug in this sensor on the transmission here. And snap this little tab into place. Our harness, retainer. I'm going to install a new clip into the fender liner and tighten all the screws on both sides. I'm going to install the wheels on both sides, and then I'll torque them down. Before I start out here at the top, I'm going to go inside and hook up the steering column to make sure our wheels are straight out here. And I went ahead and put some red Loctite on this bolt. And I'll go ahead and get the cover on. That goes around that column. From up top here, I'm going to start with the last couple of bell housing bolts. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put these shifter cables back into place. Same thing on this one, it just pushes into the housing bracket on the transmission. And snap this ball on here. And I'm going to work on getting this battery tray back into place. And see, there is a slave cylinder hose clips on down on the bottom, and this radiator hose will go on top over here. Okay, so there's a little lip down here that needs to slide on the frame rail, I see. install these bolts and get them tight. Go ahead and tighten up these battery tray bolts. And then tighten up a few of these things that clip on this harness back here. The slave cylinder hose underneath of the tray. Get this hose back into place. And I'll work on getting the computer installed back here now. Okay, now the computer's just got this tab back here at the bottom of it that slides into this slot on the battery tray. One mounting bolt here at the front. I don't know who tucked this plug under here. Try again. And should be able to just snap everything back into place now. There's a few of them. Okay, that's here. Should have done this one first. Yeah, these might have to get unplugged one more time. Let's see. This guy's going to go back here. This one. I see. Okay, I take a minute and figure out how the rest of these plastic housings go, and this side cover for the battery. Okay, I had to unplug the control module again here, and so I can help get this panel back installed with the heat shield on it. And the edge of this panel right here slides into this groove back here, and it just takes a little patience. Okay, and then there's this and then there's a pin at the bottom of the panel that pushes down into that hole right there. Then we can slide that harness back into its area. That didn't go. These connectors should kind of pull themselves down as you pull the latch closed. I might have to unplug that one to get that in. Looks like I do. Okay, then I've got a couple of eyelets here that go to the positive cable on the battery. We'll get working on that. Okay, one more time, take these connectors off. Because I left this housing out. I thought I could get it in after I plugged these in, but no. This is my third or fourth time with this whole assembly here. See if I get it to go together right this time. So it looks like this. So it's not too bad after you figure it out. Okay, now onto the battery. I've got these two eyelets that go on the stud here. Go ahead and get the negative cable on. And the battery hold down. Okay. Alright, so the hold down goes like this. And then this other piece goes on top. Should wedge that in nice. Oh, a couple of more covers here and the air filter housing. I'll pull these. I use the T-handle to help hold the radiator up, and an Allen wrench here. And we took the subframe out. Okay, now the front panel here on the battery. The side edge slides down into the slot on the other piece. Can install and tighten these bolts. This little cover's got a push pin over here that holds it in. Get the section of cowl to go. And this piece actually wasn't attached all the way when the car came in. Just a quarter turn. It's a 10mm plastic nut here. Okay, this slides kind of up under this, of course. Put the air filter housing in. Just got a couple of little dowels on the bottom that get pushed through these grommets on the battery tray. Safety on the bottom. Oh, right. I remember. Okay, we've got the air duct to put on. Okay. I normally wouldn't say I'm going to cross my fingers, but because that flywheel was so noisy, we're going to go ahead and start it up and hope that flywheel's quiet. We got two that were noisy out of the box. Okay, so it's going into gear. Got a few more things to do to it. It's quiet. Sounds like a bit of an exhaust rattle under there maybe. And we got to double check the alignment and get the lower shield on. So get it out for a test drive.